Hey there, it's Dean's Rewind here. I'm going to be going through my USPA B license study guide, saying it out loud to better help me, um, study for the test. Been putting it off way too long by procrastinating because I don't feel like reading, um, or just procrastinating in general. So hopefully, this helps. And maybe it'll help anyone out there that, is studying for theirs too. Um, I'll try my best to not repeat words and phrases over, but um, haven't really done this type of stuff before, having to read out loud to a camera, so I'm a little nervous. So we'll see how it goes. The study guide is from Skydive Fundamentals, so I'll link that down below. And I'm doing it off the PDF format that I have on my Google Drive, so it comes in handy if you don't have internet access. But yeah, let's get to it. USPA B License Study Guide. Basic Safety Requirements. Basic Safety Requirements, BSRs, represent commonly accepted standards necessary to promote safety in average conditions. USPA grants waivers to some BSRs when an exception is needed. However, they can only waived by the full board of directors. There's some grammar mistakes in here. Unless designated in the SIM by an SNTA or examiner only, or an executive committee of the USPA board. Waivers provide for the responsible research and development of improved techniques and methods. Compliance with federal regulations. For skydives made within the U.S. and its territories and possessions, no skydive may be made in violation of the Federal Aviation Administration FAA regulations. FAA regulations include the use of restraint systems, seat belts in the aircraft by all skydivers during taxi, takeoff, and landing. Medical requirements. All persons engaged in skydiving must possess at least a current FAA third-class medical certificate or carry a certificate of physical fitness for skydiving from a registered physician or agree with the USPA recommended medical statement in Section 4-3. Age requirements. For skydives made within the U.S. and its territories and possessions, skydivers are to be at least 18 years of age. For skydives made outside the U.S. and its territories and possessions, the minimum age is specified by the country's requirements. USPA membership is required of any skydiver cleared for self-supervision at a USPA group member drop zone, with an exception for non-resident foreigners. Alcohol and drugs. No person may make a parachute jump or attempt to make a jump if that person is or appears to be under the influence of either alcohol or any drug that affects that person's faculties in any way contrary to safety. In addition, no person may jump within 8 hours after the consumption of any alcoholic beverage. The 8-hour rule also applies to pilots. Winds. For licensed skydivers, ground winds are unlimited. Minimum opening altitudes. Minimum container opening altitude of 2,500 feet AGL for B license holders. DZ requirements. Areas used for skydiving should be unobstructed with a minimum radial distance of 165 feet for B license holders to the nearest obstacles. Obstacles are defined as telephone and power lines, towers, buildings, bodies of water, highways, vehicles, and trees. However, trees that will not interfere with parachute landings are not considered obstacles. Manned ground-to-air communications. Radios, panels, smoke, lights are to be present on the drop zone during skydive operations. The pre-jump requirement. The appropriate altitude and surface winds are to be determined prior to conducting any skydive. Extraordinary skydives. Night, water, and demonstration jumps are to be performed only with the advice of the appropriate USPA SNTA examiner or regional director. The USPA SNTA is after that is examiner or regional director. Pre-planned breakaway jumps, intentional cutaways cannot be made by B-licensed skydivers. Any person performing a wingsuit jump must have at least 200 skydives and hold a current skydiving license. Free fall within 500 feet vertically or horizontally of any student under parachute, including tandem students, is prohibited, excluding the videographer. Free fall within 500 feet vertically or horizontally of any licensed skydiver under canopy requires prior planning and agreement between the canopy pilot and the skydiver in free fall. Equipment. Aircraft. A jumper or the pilot must notify the appropriate air traffic control facility at least 1 hour prior to jumping, no more than 24 hours prior. In most airspace, it's a jumper or the pilot must notify the appropriate air traffic control facility at least 1 hour prior to jumping, no more than 24 hours prior in most airspace. However, many drop zones have a written notification for that location only that is renewed annually. Skydives must be made within a 25 stated mile radius of the airport or takeoff. The jump aircraft must have an operating radio for jumping to take place, and the pilot must be in contact with air traffic control prior to jumping. Some aircraft are unsafe for flight, with the door open or removed. Aircraft approved for flight with the door removed may require additional modifications and usually require additional FAA field approval. Skydive equipment. Parachutes should not be... Sorry, my dog's decides to make an appearance. Parachutes should not be rented or loaned to persons unqualified to carry out an intended skydive or to the persons of unknown ability. The use of unfamiliar, borrowed, new equipment without sufficient preparation has been a factor in many fatalities. If making an equipment change, adequate transition training should be provided. AADs and RSLs are encouraged for all jumpers. Altitude awareness is critical on every jump. Altimeters, though, use electronic and or mechanical components that are subject to damage and may fail in use. Minor differences up to 500 feet in altitude among different altimeters are to be expected, and an altimeter may lag during both ascent and descent. When an altimeter is in a jumper's burble, it may read high by as much as 1,000 feet. Therefore, pull altitude and other critical altitudes should be determined by using a combination of visual reference to the ground and to an altimeter. For example, learning what the size of cars looks like at different altitudes can help you build a mental library for estimating altitudes. Adequate protective clothing, including a helmet, goggles, gloves, and footwear, should be worn for all land jumps. Gloves become essential when the jump altitude temperature is lower than 40 degrees Fahrenheit. A jumper should always carry a protected but accessible knife in case of an emergency dictate its use. Mostly they're saying hook knife. A rigid helmet should also be worn on all skydives, and it should be lightweight and not restrict vision or hearing. All jumpers are advised to wear flotation gear when the intended exit, opening, or landing point of a skydive is within 1 mile of an open body of water. An open body of water is defined as one in which a skydiver could drown. All parachute emergency procedures should be reviewed at least annually in a training harness. Emergency procedures can also be practiced on the ground at every reserve repack. To do so, simulate some type of main malfunction on the ground, then cut away and deploy the reserve. This practice gives you first-hand knowledge about the potential pull forces and direction of pull on your gear. Maintenance. The FAA requires the reserve parachute assembly, including harness, container, canopy, risers, pilot chute, deployment device, and ripcord, to be approved. For Ram Air Reserve, jumpers should not exceed the maximum suspended weight specified by the manufacturer, not necessarily the maximum certificated load limit. I'll say that again. Not necessarily the maximum certificated load limit. The main parachute of a dual assembly may be packed by a FAA rigger, a person under the direct supervision of a FAA rigger, or the person who intends to use it on the next jump. It requires at least an FAA senior rigger to maintain and repair the parachute system. However, major repairs and alterations may be performed only by or under the supervision of a FAA master rigger, the parachute manufacturer, or any other manufacturer the FAA considers competent. AADs, if installed, must be maintained according to the manufacturer's instructions. Highware items requiring rigger maintenance includes, these are all in bullet points, so bear with me. Pilot chute and deployment handle. Look for broken stitching around the apex and the seam where the pilot chute canopy fabric and mesh meet. Check for security at the bridle attachment point. The fabric and the mesh should be in good condition, as both eventually wear out. Number 2, bridle Velcro. Velcro anywhere degrades with use and needs to be replaced every 100 and 250 uses. Bridle Velcro, if present, is particularly important because if it comes loose, it can cause a premature deployment. The Velcro should be clean, dry, and free of debris. Third bullet point. Deployment bag. Look for distortion in the grommets, especially at the bridle, and fabric damage around their edges. Check the loops that hold the line stow bands. If Velcro is used, replace it as necessary. The fourth bullet point. Closing pin. Check that the loop holding the closing pin to the bridle is secure and not been cut by the eye of the pin. Check for nicks or corrosion on the pin and replace it if any appear. Sorry, my computer's giving me updates, I guess, or notifications. Next bullet point. Pilot chute attachment. Look for wear where the bridle attaches to the canopy. Look for broken stitching on the canopy itself where it is reinforced for the bridle attachment loop or ring. Parachute damage. I'm not going to do bullet point after bullet point and saying it out loud. The next one is parachute damage. Likely areas of parachute damage include the top center skin, end cells, and the stabilizers. Check for small holes on the top skin from where the bridle attachment stop ring has caught fabric in the bag's top grommet. Avoidable with a good packing technique. Look for wear on the top skin and end cells caused by contact with sharp objects or plants with thorns. Look for wear in and around the reinforcements and the stabilizers that contain the slider stops. Look for broken or missing stitching along the seams. The slider. Inspect for distortion in the slider grommets and wear around their inside edges. Sliders are important, high-stress components, and should be maintained to the highest standard. Lines. Look for wear anywhere along the lines, but especially where the slider grommets contact metal connector links. Line damage at the links calls for line replacement, but, the rigger can also advise the jumper about link choices, protection, and habits that minimize damage. Lines sometimes shrink unevenly over time, and all lines eventually require replacement. Refer to the manufacturer's recommendations. Slider bumpers. Metal connector links. Slider bumpers, if present, protect the slider grommets and the lines from damage by taking it themselves. Most require periodic replacement. Bumpers need to be tight on the link or secured to prevent them from sliding up the lines and stopping the slider. Brake system. When Velcro is used, placing the toggles on the risers immediately after landing prevents Velcro damage and tangles. Velcro needs to be replaced when worn. Examine the brake lock eye for damage and wear. Look at the attachment point for the keeper ring, including the attachment ring stitching on the opposite surface of the riser. Inspect tuck tab toggle keepers for security. Riser release system. Look for wear in the loops holding the rings and the white retaining loop, especially if you drag your rig when stowing the lines. That's not advised. Be sure that any service bulletins on risers for that system have been accomplished. Check the fittings on both ends of the cable housings for security. Look for kinks in the release cable where it connects the white retaining loop, which may indicate a problem with hard openings or the design and construction of the 3-ring assembly. Check the front and back of the riser webbing for fraying or strains around the edges of the grommets. Look for broken or loose tackings on the cable housings. Check riser inserts for cutaway cable ends if installed. Riser covers. Replace any retaining Velcro when it loses tackiness. Replace distorted tuck tabs when they become ineffective. Happens with use. Main container closing grommets. Inspect for distortion and fabric damage around the edges. Feel for severe distortion or breakage of the plastic stiffener inside the fabric where the grommet is set. Main and reserve pin covers. Replace Velcro when it fails to stay firmly attached. Replace plastic stiffeners when distortion from use renders them ineffective. Equipment should not be stored in a equipment should be stored in a cool, dry, dark place. Heat weakens AAD batteries and elastic stow bands. Cars can reach temperatures that are too hot for safe, prolonged storage. The ultraviolet rays of the sun degrade nylon, and the moisture corrodes hardware. Very dangerous since rust degrades nylon and promotes mildew. Undesirable, but harmless to nylon. Many chemicals and acids damage parachute materials. Maintenance of 3-ring release system. Number 1. Disassemble the system every month to clean the cable and twist and manage the ends of the risers, since nylon riser webbing develops a memory, especially when dirty. Clean the cables according to the manufacturer's instructions. A sludge-like coating builds up over time that causes them to bind, increasing the required pull force. And then number 3, I don't know if I said number 2, but number 3 is reassemble the system. Main closing loop. Damage greater than 10% warrants replacement. Jumpers also need to check that there is sufficient tension to keep the container closed in free fall, as a loose closing loop could result in premature deployment. Check the owner's manual for the correct tension. Typically, the closing pin should require 8 to 11 pounds to extract. The closing loop tension can be adjusted by moving the overhand knot or replacing the loop with the knot tied in the correct place. Use only closing loop material approved by the harness and container manufacturer. I think I'm going to stop on this one and continue with a part 2 and finish it up. I'm on the 6th page. So yeah, there's only 13 pages, so yeah. Because emergency procedures is it looks like oh no, I'll continue, I guess. No, I'll go in the next one. Anyways, regardless, thanks for sticking with me. If you have, again, I'll post the Skydive fundamentals down below. Anyways, thank you so much, and have a good one.